Now let's talk about Pakistan's iron brother China. It is facing a crisis of its own. There is a power crunch in China and Beijing is struggling to find solutions. 21 out of 31 mainland provinces, 21 out of 31, are facing power cuts. Beijing has issued orders to the top state-owned energy companies. The message is quite simple. Do everything you can to secure supplies for the winter. According to a report, these orders came straight from Han Zheng, the vice premier of China. He reportedly said Beijing would not tolerate blackouts. But the damage, you see, is already done. Manufacturing in China has shrunk. For the first time since the pandemic began, factory activity has dropped. The reason is quite obvious. Factories do not have any electricity, so they're struggling to operate. Factory owners say their businesses may not even survive if power cuts don't end.
Right now there are power cuts. Electricity is really important to all of us in our daily lives or small companies like my own. We aren't even a small company. We are just a processing factory. Anyway, I think as long as we can afford it, we are willing to cooperate because the country needs it. But if power curbs continue in the long run, we have to think of a way to deal with this.
I'm really worried if power curbs will happen frequently in future. We can't work if there are more power curbs. We need to make a system for the power and department to inform us when these curbs happen, when they don't want us to use power, and that we must halt production. I'm really worried if further curbs happen.
That's not their only worry. Power cuts are making factory workers sick. Here's an example. 23 workers in Liaoyang had to be admitted to a hospital. That's because a power outage in the factory led to carbon monoxide poisoning. And this happened in a steel making and metal casting firm. A power cut knocked out the exhaust of the factory, and as a result, the workers ended up inhaling carbon monoxide. This is what China's energy crisis is doing. It's threatening the lives of Chinese citizens, Chinese workers, and their suffering does not end with this. They're also facing the prospect of bigger bills. Some local governments have allowed companies to raise power prices. Coal-fired power plants in at least 5 provinces have increased their fixed rates. In Ningxia, Shanghai, Shandong, Guangdong and parts of Inner Mongolia, the plants are now charging 10% more for electricity. Clearly, the crisis is worsening in China. What is Xi Jinping doing? Well, he's busy steering his nationalism drive. Today, China invaded Taiwan's airspace again. 25 military planes buzzed Taiwan's air defense zone to mark China's National Day. 25. Yesterday, the Chinese president led the Martyrs' Day ceremony in Beijing. He was joined by other 6 members of the Politburo Standing Committee. The Standing Committee is China's top decision-making body. And Xi Jinping is resorting to a tried and tested tool here, nationalism and party loyalty, to tide over these difficult times. But the party's dominance is being challenged in more places than one. In Hong Kong, for example, a small group carried out a protest against the Communist Party. They marched with pictures of pro-democracy protesters and politicians, the people who've been jailed for demanding their rights. Do you know how many policemen were deployed for this protest? Going by one estimate, 8,000 police officers to deal with a handful of protesters in Hong Kong. That's how paranoid the Communist Party is of opposition. This protest was contained, but if the power cuts across China continue at this rate, Beijing might be forced to deal with far bigger crowds. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.